First off, good evening, everybody. This is a really terrific turnout, and welcome to our online and in-person IAF audience to the third event in our 2023 season. My name is Mike Leonard, and I'll be serving as your MC tonight. And we really hope that you enjoyed the Eastern Standard Time video. It was made possible by the generosity of Northern Michigan's very own The Accidentals. And if you are not familiar with their music, they have a well-earned international following, and their musical skills are showcased in this song dedicated to Michigan and the land and the water that make this place special. And when we asked Sav and Katie, The Accidentals, for permission to show their video, they didn't hesitate. The song is featured on their album Reimagined, so please consider buying it and playing it for your grandkids. I guarantee your cool factor will increase tenfold. So at this point in our 30th season, we're excited to remind you about Academic World Quest and our direct outreach to high school students, fostering their education on global affairs topics. We have about 10 teams so far committed to our regional competition coming up in February. Then we're going to send the winners, all expenses paid, to the national competition in Washington, D.C. This will be IAF's 11th season hosting a regional AWQ competition, the only global affairs competition of its kind in Northern Michigan, and we can only do this with our community's strong support. So this year, we're starting the fundraising early. On Giving Tuesday, that's November 28th, for those marking the calendar, IAF will launch a campaign to support these local student competitors. Right now, we're looking for first-in gifts, challenge gifts, matching gifts to make your donations go further. If you want to help jumpstart this impactful support for students, you can pull us aside tonight or send us an email. The address is on tonight's program. And of course, we'll be letting you know all the details soon about how you can support Academic World Quest this year, starting in November 28th. Before I introduce our guest speaker and moderator, please take a moment to silence your cell phones. Our speaker will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. And this year we've changed we've introduced a change in the procedure. In the past, the MC would select the questions randomly. There were a couple of problems with this system. Because we were not able to respond to all the questions, often the best and most insightful questions were not called upon. The other reason is that because of the differences among speakers' voices, quite often online listeners were not able to hear the questions. So, this year we're trying something different. We're handing out cards. You are encouraged to write your question as legibly as possible, please, on the card and hand it to one of our team in the aisles. You can remain anonymous, or you can put your name on the card. If you are a student, all of those up back there in the nosebleed section. By the way, you are welcome to sit down here with the rest of us. If you're a student, please put student on the top of the card. And that's because we always try to ensure that student voices and questions are heard. You are our future. If you're part of an online audience, you can send us your question at any point in the presentation using the Q&A function. We look forward to a terrific conversation tonight. If you are a regular attendee of our presentations, you will know that IAF is headed in a new direction, and what you're going to see tonight is representing that. It might be more accurate to say an expanded focus, because we were going to keep the lecture series that you've come to love and expect. We also intend to focus at least 2 of our presentations each year on a topic that is the reason many of you, and myself included, settled here, and that's the abundant fresh water. Sadly, most of the world is not as fortunate as us. The lack of fresh water, exacerbated by climate change, flawed management, and pollution, is the root cause of many of our global problems. It is the nexus for much of the refugee migration and conflict we see in the world around us. As Mark Twain once observed, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. We are indeed fortunate to have as our first speaker on this topic, Dr. Kaveh Madani. Dr. Madani is an environmental scientist and director of the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment, and Health, known informally as the UN think tank on water. Dr. Madani, among his many accomplishments, is known for his work on integrating game theory and decision analysis into water resource management models. He was educated at the University of California, Davis, and Lund University and University of Tabriz. Awards include New Faces Civil Engineering, the Arne Richter Award for Outstanding Young Scientists, the Walter Huber Civil Engineering Research Prize, the Ambassador Award, and several others. If these aren't familiar to you in the scientific community, they are a big deal. He has more than 200 publications and is a fellow of the American Geophysical Union and the American Society of Civil Engineers. Dr. Madani's scientific career concludes the United Nations University City College of New York, Yale, Iran's Department of Environment, and the Imperial College, London. Known as Iran's expat echo warrior, he returned to Iran and served as the Deputy for International Affairs, Innovation, and Socio-Cultural Engagement, the Deputy Head of Iran's Department of Environment, and the Chief of Iran's Department of International Affairs and Convention Center. During that time, he underwent numerous interrogations and was arrested by the Islamic Revolutionary Guards. While in this post, he served as the chair of the National Committee on International Climate Change Negotiations and led Iran's delegation to the 23rd United Nations Climate Change Conference, aka COP23. He resigned in 2018 and left Iran. He now leads the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment, and Health. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Madani to the stage. Dr. Madani, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for your very extensive and generous introduction. It is a true pleasure to be here. Never been to this part of Michigan, but last, I think, 30 hours we have been here or less. We have had a lot of adventures in the city, and I'm already enjoying it. I hope I can come back. It was a real pleasure to also learn about what is happening at NMC and all the stuff related to water. You know it well that you're blessed with having so much water, so much clean and beautiful water resources in this territory, and I'm sure you know the value of it and why you should protect it. But that's not the situation in many parts of the world. Before I start, let me thank the IAF people for inviting me, for having me here, and thank you all for attending this talk and your desire to learn more about water. I hope the discussion tonight would be useful. So when this invitation was arranged and we got it on the calendar, the things were not this dark in the Middle East. The situation was different, and I think at least we could focus on some other aspects of the problems around the world. But we are at a moment that I think when we talk about water in the Middle East and problems around the world, we cannot dismiss what's happening. Although we cannot resolve them, we are very hopeless at the moment. But we can think in a better way to understand what's going on. As we know, this is no longer a essentially human crisis. It's a crisis of humanity. We are challenged with also staying humans and remaining ethical, being challenged about how we think and how we value lives of innocent people, and it's hard to dismiss what's happening. We're even challenged to take sides, like we're asked to take sides and have judgments, which is absolutely unfair. So I thought we use today for having some discussions around complexity and why the problems that the world is facing today are greater than the sum of their parts, and why we have the responsibility of thinking twice and thinking more about the different aspects before we make any conclusion. Conclusion about who's guilty, conclusion about what the solution is, conclusion about what must be done, and so on. And I think we are very lucky that we have a chance and the bandwidth to think about the future, to think about tomorrow. And many people on this planet don't even have that luxury. And if we have that chance, I think we should take advantage of it and be more educated and informed and think in a very constructive way. So today, I think the main message of this conversation today is that complex problems are greater than the sum of their parts. 2 + 2 is not 4 in the real world. When Aristotle talked about this. So he meant it in a very positive way. But I mean it in a very cynical way, as you will learn today. And that essentially means that understanding complex problems is really nearly impossible, understanding all aspects. Yet we have the responsibility and the chance of navigating through complexity in a way that the damages down the line would be less. So this talk would be about water, but almost like about everything but water. So that's why, like, you know, so I'm trying to say that water problems in most cases are normally much bigger than the water itself, and unless we understand that, we cannot resolve them. But you know, I did my degrees in engineering. In engineering, we learned early on that water goes from a high elevation to a lower elevation. It's gravity which makes decisions for us, and that's something we got to respect. That's how we do the designs. I then did my, you know, took some economics classes and did my postdoc in water economics, and I was in California, and I learned, no, water can even go outward when we are willing to pay for it. So economics can even overrule physics. And then I got into politics, and I realized that, you know, politics can destroy any other things and overrule all of those things. So yes, the real world is nothing similar to what our books are telling us and what we are telling people in classes today. We talk about wars over water. We know that water is part of the wars that are being fought, and we know it well as people who are watching what's happening in the Middle East, that shutting, essentially cutting water access was one of the tactiques and strategies early on in this game, because everyone knows the value of water. The reality is nothing similar to what we say. Yes, people have rights to water, human rights of water is recognized, but there are lots of other rights that we have that are recognized theoretically, but when it comes to implementation, they're not being enforced. And there are a lot of people on this planet who don't have access to clean water and sanitation, including people in conflict zones, including people in poor countries that see water all over the place but don't have enough to drink or take showers with. So we got to understand this, that yes, so this is of course from California, where water goes upwards, but and this is the scene today in many parts of the world, and water cannot be decoupled from what is happening and the wars that are being fought. So yes, the real world 2 + 2 is not 4, and we have to understand this if you want to provide a good interpretation of what is happening around us. It's not easy. It's not easy because our mind is likes reductionism. Like we get more comfortable with finding a simple narrative that can explain a complex situation. And if scientists actually try to, not oversimplify things, sometimes they lose the interest of the audience, lose the interest of the decision makers. But at the same time, if you reduce things too much, then you would mislead communities, you would mislead people, and you would mislead policymakers, and that's something tough there. I was very negative and cynical. Let's also talk about the positive stories. We are in the midst, in the fourth industrial revolution. The power that we have today, the computational capacity that we have, the devices we have access to, our cell phones and our computers and everything, AI, satellites, machine learning, all those things are giving us an unprecedented capacity to collect data, monitor data, deal with data, and this is creating a lot of hope. Even if you think about it, about what is happening around the world, these technologies are very helpful to us because now we can monitor what is happening around the world. What we are seeing in the Middle East is not unique. Humanity has experienced this very actually quite frequently over the last century, but a lot of times we were uninformed about them because we didn't have access to these technologies. So there is a positive side here. So our computational capacity is unprecedented. And that's a good thing, and that makes us very hopeful that we can solve a lot of problems. This was helpful even during COVID-19, our access to data. We are very strong now. We can monitor a lot of places without going there. We can collect data, we can report, we can make observations, and even constructively help in a lot of situations when it comes to storytelling, and this is the power that we have. So the fourth industrial revolution is is equipping us with new power, something we didn't have, and hopefully we can take advantage of that. Speaking of data, though, something which is bothering me a lot is now we go to any sort of UN meetings, UN conventions, you hear heads of states, representatives of states, and also a lot of people in the UN and other places talk about data and thinking that data on itself can solve all problems. Now that we have AI, all problems get solved. Actually, too much data can even be misleading because a lot of times we see false correlations. We see data, there are some data here and then some data here, and we think there is a correlation between them. But we can make mistakes. AIs are the machines, the artificial intelligence is dependent on our intelligence. And if we don't train things well, they can actually mislead us. All these things that you see can be different interpretations of those data points, and they're all correct. And if you don't have the correct narrative, then you can be misleading. If you rush into coming up with narratives, with definitions of problems, you can mislead. And then we talk about the value and the benefits of the fourth industrial revolution. Let's not forget that the problems that we are dealing with today, the environmental problems we are dealing with today, are the products of the past industrial revolutions. So at that time, our ancestors, people ahead of us, or the previous generations, also they thought they have an unprecedented capacity to solve the problems. Technology was handy, and we know that our quality of life as a result of those revolutions and inventions and innovations is much better. But if you want to be realistic, there are also a lot of unintended consequences that were created by those solutions that we must carefully consider. And these remind us that yes, we might also get it wrong a lot of times. We got to be careful about the solutions that we are proposing because we are no different from those generations. They also got blindsided and didn't see those problems being created. So any technology, any solution that we create and we implement can have unintended consequences. In the health sciences and medical sciences, this is very well known, right? You come up with a solution. So people are dying of COVID-19. You have a vaccine, but you're not allowed to launch it and sell it until you go through a procedure. And even after that long procedure, when you can release your product goes out with a list of side effects. Tell me if we are doing the same thing in engineering, if we are thinking about in a same way, and we are doing the studies, understanding what the side effects can be, and inform people about what the side effects of those technologies that we are essentially injecting into their lives are. No, we are not doing this. A lot of technologies that we are now using have the side effects that we are unaware of. I mean, just last month, actually, we released a report on the environmental impacts of cryptocurrency, and the Bitcoin folks are now attacking me continuously for that matter. Our story wasn't that we were not trying to say cryptocurrency is bad. Cryptocurrency is a technology, is a solution which comes with a lot of benefits, but it has also some negative aspects that we have to know about. And if we know about them early on, if there are some people who go out of their way and identify these unintended consequences, then we have a chance to proactively manage them. Otherwise, at a time that we realize the impacts, it's very late to cope with them. And this is true about internet at a time that COVID-19 hit and everyone was very excited about going online. We published this study about the environmental footprint of using internet and watching videos and turning on cameras. And I remember a Canadian comedy show said that a bunch of scientists who didn't want to pull their pants up during Zoom meetings have now proven that turning on your camera during meetings would have an environmental footprint. It is true that all these activities and the things we are getting used to have unintended consequences. So we got to be less arrogant about what we can accomplish and what we can do, and understand that we have to change our thinking paradigm. The way we think, the way we educate, the way we teach, right now is based on a linear thinking paradigm. We have been trained to think that way. They present us with the current problem and a desired situation. So you see a problem in the Middle East, you have a desired situation, you want a peaceful world, you want a place like where everyone has access to water, there's water shortage, you want to solve this problem. So your problem is defined, and then your solution is defined based on this. So you go ahead and implement something. You might build a dam, you might decide to dig a deeper well, you might want to put a desalination plant in place, or do something else. What we don't try to do is to think about the possible feedback of the implementation of that solution on the problem itself. Let's say we think Middle East is chaotic, there are terrorists there, and we decide to intervene and take our troops there and do something. What we don't think about is what's going to happen if you try, in 10 years from now, and if the situation can even get worse and terrorism can get can get even more widespread and go to other places. If you look at what the interventions that have been made in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and all those places, and all the things which happened with Libya, Syria, Egypt, Tunisia, and other places, you should see the impact of not thinking non-linearly. The impact of thinking linearly. So we don't think about the unintended consequences because we have not been trained to do so. We are a lot of times rushing into implementing solution or interpreting the problem. We think we understand the problem very well and its boundaries, and that's not the case. So many times you don't do that. I have some citations here, and I like to acknowledge some of my co-authors. But let me explain this with a water example from the Middle East. The beautiful city of Isfahan, former capital of Iran. A city which has its identity tied to a river. A historic city, lots of beautiful city with lots of tourists going there, people proud of this river and all those buildings and constructions and monuments from many years ago. And in Iran, when we say many years ago, we're talking about a different time scale. So this is a city which has a high water demand in the urban area. It's part of a basin. The river system is part of a basin which has high agricultural demand. It used to be the second, and still might be the second most industrialized also basin in the country, and it is in the center of Iran. So Iran is drier than many other countries. Let's say, you can compare many parts of Iran and its problems actually with California. So we have, in places we have snow and ski resorts and so on, and then we also have places that are very dry. So what people have tried to do in this place is to address this problem through water transfers, transferring water from other basins, other neighboring basins which are richer. Do we have that example in this country? Yes. Again, look at California. We moved water from San Francisco, San Joaquin, essentially Delta toward Los Angeles and Southern California, going through the Central Valley of California, and it's feeding the agriculture there. People in Southern California rely on it. Same mentality. People are not very different in different parts of the world, and this has been an old thinking in Iran, and that's what they try to do. But that beautiful river now looks like this. This is me on the riverbed, I think September 2016, if I'm not mistaken. And that's how it looks like most of the time. Imagine how it affects the city and people. So it's like city of London without Thames, right? So the identity of that city is being affected. And the water transfers, which have superficially actually have more than double the natural flow of water. So the amount of water coming in is more than actually the natural flow of water. Have not been able to resolve the issue. Why not? I mean, technology and lots of water you're bringing from the neighboring places, and it must solve the problem. But let's walk through this for people who might think that technology can on itself solve our problems. Again, a little bit more information about this place. So we have a reservoir upstream, and then a river that goes through these agricultural land and urban areas, and eventually into a wetland. Into a wetland that is preserved under the Ramsar Convention. And once that wetland is happy and healthy, you know that the system is functioning well. That's true about your lake here. If the lake is happy and healthy and fresh, and then it means that good things are happening upstream. If it's not, then irresponsible people live upstream. So then in this case, they have tried to bring new water into the place from the neighboring basins, and they thought this would resolve the issue. And just similar to what we saw in Vegas, Las Vegas, what we saw in Southern California, what we have seen in Silicon Valley, the transfer of water not only didn't resolve the issue, but it has over time resulted in now new conflicts and clashes between people in neighboring places. Now people in upstream areas are nervous about losing their water. So again, Northern California, Southern California, farmers fighting with the environmentalists and so on. And then people in downstream are happy. They're asking for more water. They're nervous. They think the situation is unfair. The people upstream think about in the same way. They also think that their environment is being affected by this. So you have protests from farmers. You have farmers who are blowing up pipes, water transfer pipes, and then you see it both sides, right? So big protests in Iran happened a few years ago, and you have people. It started with protests upstream, and then a few months after it happened downstream. Both groups were concerned about water, but they were asking totally for two solutions that were opposite each other. And then if you're a politician in that country, how do you resolve this issue? Because both sides are unhappy, and whatever you do in a win-lose situation is going to affect both sides, and then it's really hard to get something accomplished. So what we do in my field is we develop mathematical models to study these things, but I'm not going to get you bored. But this is here to impress you. So we do a lot of differential equations and all that. But we create these models. What happens is that in engineering, they tell us what the water demand would be. There's a projection. They say 10 years from now, this is how much water you need to provide. And then 20 years, 50 years, and then there are multiple scenarios. And then we do the design for that situation. So it's always the case. They ask you to build a, 10-story building, and you never question that. That's something given to you, and you come up with a solution for that. And that's what we do. I was, at some point, too curious, and I tried to ask, where does that come from, right? So who determines these scenarios, and are they based on facts, and can we do a better job in calculating them? So we tried to develop a model which also reflected the dynamics of what's happening in the farming community, so the agriculture. So because this this basin, in this basin, 90% of water goes into the agricultural sector. And that sounds big, but you know, if you look at the same thing in California, it's like about 80%. Now, people might argue that 80% is not the case. A lot of water it remains there for the environment, but we're talking about the water that is being, like the water use. So it's huge wherever you have irrigations. And in the Middle East, in many places, this is the situation. Most of the water goes to the agriculture. Worldwide, 70% of the water is used by the farmers and the agricultural sector. Okay, so you have a lot of issues actually to address and to think. So then you look at the farmers and what they do and how they essentially use water or decide about what crop to grow. Like, you know, so they look at the price signals. Last year, onion was very expensive. They decide to go with onion. In this place, it's dry in central Iran. They're even growing rice here because people love the rice from the area. And those are all the realities of there. But then we also looked at what's happening with migration to this place because it's an attractive place. As a result of bringing water into the basin, development has continued, so job opportunities have been created, and there are migrations. So we realized that there is actually, when you make water available, the attractiveness of this area grows. Silicon Valley, same thing. Southern California, same thing. And then you have this messy model that you run, and then we publish a lot of papers with these graphs, and we get excited about those. But then the question is, so what? Now, I want to explain this to a minister and tell the minister what's going on, or I have like a minute on like live TV, and I have to explain what's going on. It's so interesting when we looked at this, you know, this modeling exercise. What we realized was that, so as a result of each water transfer project, water shortage has gone down for some time, but then what has happened is that water shortage has grown up, and it actually, the problem even became worse. So water shortage has been created at a more extreme level. So what then we found was, the issue here is essentially what we in management science or system science we call fix that backfires. It was a counterintuitive finding because if I had used the engineering boundaries to analyze this problem, like my fellow civil engineers, I wouldn't have seen this problem. I would have made a recommendation that this basin in 10, 15 years needs this much more water, go find a source for it. And right now, actually, people are doing this. This is central Iran. They're thinking of desalinating water of the Persian Gulf and then pumping the water for hundreds of kilometers toward this place. So water goes upstream. Water, you know, a lot of energy is being killed, but they think that water must be provided because these people are not going to stop protesting. And then you don't want to mess with farmers. If you do that, then you might lose power. And this is very important in that part of the world. And we are seeing what happened with like, you know, how ISIS got created, how people who lost jobs became part of, you know, terrorism groups and so on. So that's their solution. But what we found here was very interesting. So in engineering, that's what they teach us. We have water scarcity, and then you come up with a solution for it. Dig a deeper well, build a reservoir, desalinate water, transfer water from another place. So then you increase your water supply and you balance that situation. What they don't tell us or ask us to think about is okay, what happens when you bring more water to this place? Indeed, when you bring more water to this place, watershed development continues. So you're superficially making a dry place water rich, and that attracts more, you know, so that means more water available for farming, more water available for industries, more water available for urban residents and rural residents. And then as a result of watershed development, your water demand keeps going up. And then you create a reinforcing loop that would neutralize the impact of the upper loop, and the situation gets worse. Now tell me if you have seen this in the world. We have seen it in the energy sector, we are seeing it in the water sector, because we continuously think along, you know, only about increasing water supply. So if you talk with people, they keep telling you that desalination would be the future. Yes, desalination is going to grow further and further, but desalination is not going to be different from water transfer, from dam building, reservoir building, and digging deeper wells. And if you think about it, we have learned that all of those technologies were good, but they all also had consequences. So deeper wells meant that groundwater level kept going down, and we are having land subsidence and so many other problems in many places. Well, when we built reservoirs, they affected the environment. We know about those effects very well. When we start desalinating, the brine and salt that you are dealing with goes back to the ocean, back to the sea, affecting the ecosystem. It creates a whole new set of new problems. So none of these technologies would be free of unintended consequences. That means that if you want to implement them, you have to ask, when am I going to use it, what the consequences would be, and how large how big would be my implementation. There is a big difference between a giant dam and a small dam. There is a big difference between a well that is 20 meters deep or 200 meters deep. And then, so if you think about all these things, you realize that some of your fixes can backfire if you don't think about other matters and the problem and essentially the root causes. So this is like you have infection in your body and you need antibiotic. The infection is giving you headaches. So the headache, to get rid of your headache, you take Tylenol. So Tylenol, for a few hours, you lose the pain. The symptom is gone, but the infection keeps getting worse and worse in your body. You keep taking Tylenol instead of antibiotic, and eventually your body would collapse because you treated the symptom. Water demand increase is just the symptom of the problem. What we need to find out is the main cause and the engine of development and what's happening. And this is true about other things related to environment. Our economy has one success indicator, GDP, production. So we measure success by looking at production. If you want to increase production, you have to also encourage consumption, because you have to sell your products. So consumption must increase for production to be successful. So if that is the case, consumerism must be promoted by successful economies, right? This is one of, if not the most consumptive nation, it's one of the most consumptive nations in the world. So this continues. Now, we are asking the same institutions that have created all the environmental problems to solve the problem using their existing rules and methods. And that's why it's failing, because if you want to reduce consumption, then the world would be very different. Your approaches would be different, your solutions would be different, and the political cost of implementing your solution would be huge. Can I go to farmers and ask them to reduce consumption? Is that an easy thing? Can I do that? And don't think about farmers, the rich farmers, think about subsistence farmers, farmers who lose jobs. People in the global north, we a lot of times will have a simple solution. Remove subsidies, remove subsidies, remove subsidies. If you remove subsidies in the global south, you know what happens to food prices globally. Who wants to deal with the hunger problem in the world? The most important product of water is food, and food must remain cheap to avoid revolutions and prevent revolutions. Hunger is a scary problem. Unemployment is another issue that a lot of governments need to deal with. Water is essentially the fuel to create jobs in a lot of places. You have to keep people employed, even if their farming practices are inefficient. Because the moment they lose jobs, they start migrating, there are tensions, there are fights, there's terrorism, and then you can replicate some of the problems we have seen in, for example, the Middle East and other places. I mean, we are seeing the same trends in Africa and Asia and South America and so on. So solving those problems sounds easy, but they're never about like engineering or these technological reforms as solutions. So in the complex system, we are dealing with a lot of similar situations. And all the time we think about the simple solutions because we are very reductionist. We like a technological solution. Also, policymakers like that. Also, technological solutions are fancy. They get us like excited. You like to see a big reservoir. So concrete is a sign of development, is a symbol of development, symbol of power. Steel is something exciting. Whereas if you implement a rule that is increasing the price of your bill, water bill, electricity bill, everyone is unhappy in the short run. And no politician wants to do that. It's much harder to go and talk to so many farmers about reducing their water consumption than contracting a contractor to build a giant dam. This is the reality of policy making, and that's why they don't want to engage in these sorts of problem solving. Another thing which we continuously hear, whenever there is, like, people talk about water problems in the global south, is irrigation efficiency. Improve irrigation efficiency, drip irrigation, you'll solve the problem. You're wasting a lot of water through flood irrigation and spreading the water, and there is huge evaporation. Yes, part of that is true, but experience tells us that if you only improve irrigation efficiency, then you increase water consumption with it, because farmers are not stupid to return the amount of water that is being saved through efficiency improvement. They're gonna essentially grow a different crop, which is thirstier, or enlarge their farming area. So as a result of actually irrigation efficiency improvement, in the absence of other measures that control consumption, you increase water consumption and you lose return flows. So in California, we had this issue during the big drought when the system was so efficient that the recharge was not part of the system. So when you do flood irrigation, part of that water percolates down, goes into groundwater. And that was not the case because irrigation efficiency had been improved. Is water sector the only sector having that problem? No. We have learned it in the energy sector. We used to think that by efficiency improvement, energy consumption would be reduced. But it didn't happen because we came up with more production and we used the energy for other things, and then we increased even the temperature in our houses, and now our comfort, definition of comfort level even changed. And that's why, like, another issue that we are not talking about much, that they tell us that, of course, we have to increase energy production from renewable sources. Good, yes. But if you don't control consumption, then what's going to happen? What we hear, they give us is like all these graphs which show the growth in the renewables. But then what we're missing in the bigger picture is what is the percentage in the big water energy supply portfolio, and what's happening to consumption. So that's an information we don't get. Another example of the Middle East, or like neighboring Middle East. So one other solution coming from the global north, sustainability, and then development funds are there. We immediately think that the idea of using solar panels for pumping groundwater is a good idea. It's a sustainable idea because we're using sun, or desalinating with solar panels. That's cool. So a bunch of smart people with good intention probably decided to do this and implement it, and it's being implemented. It's good to get people connected to the energy and the grid. It's very helpful. It changes the quality of life. So they started giving Afghan farmers solar pumps. So that's good. Their life got better and better. We see, like, you monitor the region with satellites. You see green spaces is essentially increasing in terms of area. Production is helpful. The economy is changing. Their livelihood is making improvements. But then, like, when you process these images, and that's what one company actually out of UK did so, then they found something strange there. Like, the question then was, yes, everything is green, but what are they growing? So we saw the increase in terms of essentially irrigated land. And I was working for a downstream country. Of course, I was getting nervous because when upstream water consumption is increasing, there would be effect on the downstream, and we have a transboundary system, transboundary river coming into Iran. So that was I was nervous about it. But thinking about Afghanistan is doing well. But it turns out that water is being used for growing poppies. So as a result, actually, Europe didn't have any shortage in heroin for a while, for a good period, and the beneficiaries were happy, in many parts of the world. And if you look at what happened in Afghanistan, you see steadily, like, consumption and production, well, like water consumption, of course, but production of poppy has increased. So drug addicts, those using opium and heroin and other things, they're happy with it. But look what has happened, facilitated by those reductionist thinkers, those people who thought only about making it cool, solar-based, and so on. So because they didn't think about the nonlinear, they didn't think non-linearly, they didn't think about the side effects. And that's something we gotta change. We have to understand that we are dealing with complex problems, and if we want to solve problems, we have to be committed to not creating new problems. It's not easy because by definition, like we always miss part of the problem. It's not easy to capture everything when you try to solve a problem. But if we, from the start, think differently, then our solution would be different. Now, when I went to the water world, and into policy, I was, of course, extremely happy that I had a chance to serve as a deputy vice president level of a country with all those problems, and then I can use science. I have also learned from the mistakes of the, essentially American West, and then, there are mistakes to avoid actually in that country. So water was my world, and I gradually learned that we are dealing with lots of problems. It's really hard to remain rational and capture everything. Everything is dependent on everything else, like there is all these causal relationship. Uncertainty is huge, actually, when you want to deal with this problem. It's really hard to predict the future of these, how they evolve, look at the problems we have faced, humanity, COVID, all the, now wars, Ukraine, and all these things that are happening. How many of these were like forecasted, projected by the smart people, by the elite, by all these think tanks? We missed them, so it's really hard to understand what is going on. And when you have humans, there are evolutionary changes and so on. But when I went into politics, I realized water is just one small dot in the whole complex universe, which has a lot of other things, of course, environment, energy, and so on that we talk about. But in policy making, you got to think about lots of other things. What do we learn from the problems today in the Middle East? Can we have no peace and think about the environment? How many people are talking about what is happening to the birds as a result of bombing Gaza or exploding things in Israel? How many people are thinking about the future of endangered species in Ukraine? When people are dying, no one is talking about those things. Can I disaggregate peace and try to solve water problems and environmental problems? The real story is different. The way that politicians think and solve problems is different. And by definition, actually, complex problems, that's what science tells us, complex problems don't have any solution. At the end of the day, you're dealing with trade-offs, and whatever you implement would affect some other sectors in a negative way. So it's all about these calls and decisions that you have to balance things against each other. And then you have to deal with situations of explain, this is the challenge for the scientists, because the scientists want to go into the details and explain everything, and it's very hard because people like conspiracy theories. They want a simple solution. They want a simple narrative for the problem. And I say this and I finish, I know I'm over time. But this is the paper I wrote after coming back from politics. Try to simplify what is happening in this complex universe. What I see is that, actually this is the Eisenhower matrix, essentially revised. So we're hearing that he was using it for essentially prioritizing his daily tasks, what to deal with first. And I try to explain actually what is happening in public policy with the same thing. Politicians, policymakers, even media and other things, they have a limited bandwidth. You have limited resources, limited attention span, and limited time to cope with problems. So then in this situation, and no matter if you're in the global north or global south, your resources are always limited. So then which problem do you deal with first? The problems that are both very urgent and very important, relatively, compared to other problems. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter how much I like water, how much you like water. Water is not a problem that the society, policymakers, the world considers as the most urgent and most important problem. And in order to move water from the place it is at to that situation, we need different crises. We need extreme events. Floods, droughts, when those extremes are out there, there is a window of opportunity. Everyone is talking about it. And the political cost of reform for the politicians would drop because the society is ready for implementing a change. Without them, unfortunately, without them, no reform is being implemented. And that is very sad. Now, in societies when crises come irregularly and there is some time distance between one occasion and one extreme to the other extreme, you have a chance to deal with things. But if you are in a society like the Middle East, and where crises are daily, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but we certainly know there would be another crisis. We wake up, so all of a sudden there is something new. Governments, even the society, doesn't have the chance to deal with one problem, and they just have to jump from one problem to the other, to the other, to the other. And water has no chance there. Environment is the same thing. Now we have put a lot of effort into campaigning about climate change, and climate change might be doing even better than water, which is very strange because water is the major component there. But it's not COVID. When COVID came, if you look at what the environmental people in the global north wrote in some of the leading papers back then, about why the media is paying so much attention to COVID-19, which is like a flu, and more people are getting killed because of air pollution and climate change. And they were thinking that the discussion of climate change is being overshadowed by the discussions and attention that the media is giving to COVID-19. Because at a time, it was only the Chinese who were dying or the Iranians were dying. But then the moment it came to their territories, then the story was different, right? So a lot of times, unfortunately, we don't understand the big concerns of those people in other parts of the world, and then we don't understand why they don't engage in climate change negotiations, because it's about the future. They're dealing with problems right now. Are you thinking about their hunger? Are you thinking about their current issues, lack of peace, lack of access to water, and so on? And you're talking about something that doesn't give them goosebumps. You're talking about 50 years from now, some places might not be livable. Hey, that's their situation today. And unless you understand that, unless you try to engage them, capture their concerns into the problem, you have a different situation. COVID-19 was killing us. The moment it started killing us, we took it seriously. Everyone knew that was the most urgent and most important problem. Fortunately, environmental issues are not that bad. Fortunately, in terms of the death toll, but unfortunate because they don't get the attention they deserve. We know how fundamental these problems are and how they can affect the humanity's existence and future. But they're not getting the attention. And I was talking to one of you about the efforts around what your community doing about the Great Lakes, and information, education was one of the things that was mentioned, and all the efforts related to that. That's exactly what we need to do. We need to increase the understanding of those problems, the urgency of the problems, and then create windows of opportunities for decision makers to act. And when we do that, we have to understand the world is different, societies are different. A place where you are when you, not too far from Flint, thinks about water differently from other parts of the United States. In places where people don't have water to drink, they're not thinking about the things we are thinking about. And we have to understand that. So if we want to be prescriptive and prescribe solutions for the rest of the world, they're not going to work. And we have seen it already in different parts of the Middle East and in the global South. We have to understand that the solutions are going to be different for every society, and that diversity is what makes the world beautiful and I think efficient, and our efforts are also more effective. Thank you.
Okay. So this is where we get the audience involved, and while I'm getting set up, I'm going to start with a question here because we've got a rather large number of students tonight, Dr. Madani. And so I'm going to ask you, what advice do you have for the students and young folks out there that are just beginning with their adult lives and moving into this world? What advice do you have for them while we're setting up here?
Don't make the mistakes that we have made. I mean, I really don't know. I mean, that's the whole thing about, like, you know, so I think the message of this talk is that we should understand that there are many unknown unknowns. So the future is very uncertain. But we have to be hopeful. What I do in my classes, I think we in a discussion this morning, we also discussed this. I always try to explain to people, especially with a tool like game theory, that there is always a good reason behind every bad decision. So all the things we are seeing around us have a good reason. There are good reasons for Donald Trump becoming a president of a country. There are good reasons for fights and wars and invasions and so on. Now, you can call people irrational. The voters are irrational. The president is irrational. The terrorists are irrational. That might make your life easy because then you are the reductionist. You don't want to respect what is happening. But then you cannot solve the problem. If you want to solve the problem, I think it's just a change of attitude. Open the eyes, try to understand why certain things have evolved in certain directions, what those reasons were, why people, why terrorists kill others, why people elect certain parties and center politicians and so on. And that is when you can bring a change. If you close your eyes and call everyone irrational, then your solutions would be very prescriptive. It's what I'm seeing that is a big change in academia is that we have a new generation of professors and students who understand the value of connecting to society. In the past, we always talked about the interface of science and policy, but increasingly now we're seeing we are appreciating the interface of science and society. And I think that is somewhere our students in the next generation can invest a lot of time in, because then if you understand the societies you're trying to help better, you would be more effective.
Okay, thank you. Another question here from the virtual side. Can you talk about countries or organizations that are applying some of the lessons that you've learned here? Are there folks out there that are getting it right and recognizing that, to your point, there are no real solutions, but are they applying some of these principles?
So there are no solutions, meaning when we say there is no solution, it means that environmental problems would be with humans forever. So there is no way you can implement something and then the problem is over. Actually, it means it's going to be like this. We have to respect this. So forever, humans have problems that they need to deal with, and they solve one problem, and another problem is created. This is the rule. This is something we got to respect from day one and understand. And this is not disappointing. Another thing to mention here, when you say, are they doing it right? Again, our job in science and academia is to ask for more and say we are supposed to be ahead of the curve and say that you need to also do this and this and this and this and this. But we have made a lot of progress actually. Where we are is very different from where we were, decades ago. Our attitude toward technology is different. Our appreciation of the value of environment is different. And there is no nation which has done everything right, but you look at different nations, they have stuff to teach you. Israel can teach you how you can decouple your economy from water and appreciate the importance of water from day one when you make this development decisions. A lot of countries with old civilizations can teach you how through institutions that are set up through cooperation and bonds between citizens, you can manage water in a sustainable way for a long, long time. We can also learn lessons from different technological implementations, technological innovations around the world, policy implementations, and so on. So actually, there are tons of examples around the world. But the scale matters. That's another thing. The scale is very important. The way you solve a problem for a small community, for a village, is very different from the way you solve problems for a nation, for a continent, for the world. And if we understand the differences of scale, then we can see that, so all those solutions might be transferable, but then the match between the scale must not be forgotten. So yes, if you see a success in, for example, groundwater monitoring in say, Iran, for example, then that groundwater monitoring platform might not be easily, it's very hard to implement the very same thing in another part of the world, like California, when the regulations are not there. So it's not all about technology, it's also about the institutions that you have in place. And if there is a mismatch between institutions, then you cannot implement them. But there are tons of examples. Singapore is teaching us a lot. The changes in China are really, really, I think, motivating us and are exciting. Lots of actually progress are being made. And then of course a lot of countries in the global north have had experiences. The Europeans have made a lot of success when it comes to transboundary water management. You and your neighbor, and look at the Great Lakes and what Canada and US have accomplished when it comes to the Great Lakes and management of Great Lakes, right? So examples are too many to mention and review, but yes, we have to also forget, we shouldn't forget all these successes that we have had.
Well, Dr. Madani, here's one from another. By the way, we're getting a lot of questions from students, and that's really great.
Good.
This is from a student who's a freshwater and sustainability major, and it says, Dr. Madani, do you think that the answer to water sustainability could be global water use restrictions?
I mean, again, so restriction meaning what? So people need water for drinking, they need it for hygiene, they need it for producing food, they need it to produce energy and products and so on. So we know that globally we have to reduce our water consumption. There are still many nations actually that have to increase their water consumption to improve their quality of life. So it's different when we talk about different nations, and those restrictions, if we want to implement those, have to be different in different countries, and we have to consider their issues. But can we implement a solution like that? No. Global restrictions won't work, and we have seen it. Have we been able to solve the climate change problem by creating a restriction? And can we enforce anything of that kind? I think no. I think it's like the solution is that we all try to understand problems better, explain them better, develop a portfolio approach, understand that technology would be part of the solution, but not the whole solution. Keep our eyes open, understand the society we are dealing with. Don't be prescriptive, and then implement solutions in a different way.
Okay, this is from our virtual community, and it's also from a student. I think everybody's figured it out. If you want me to ask a question, you put student on top. This says, if certain issues today are not leading priorities, and therefore not all countries are working towards solving them, is it possible by the time we respond, it'll already be too late?
I think that is the case. It's already too late. And a lot of damages that we have essentially caused are irreversible. That's why I use the term actually water bankruptcy instead of water crisis, because I think crisis has a limited time span. Crisis is an extreme situation in which we get our acts together and there is still hope to restore the system. But what we are seeing today is a failure situation. Parts of the system has already collapsed and cannot be recovered. It's not possible to restore the groundwater level in many places. It's not possible to reverse land subsidence in many places. It's not possible to bring biodiversity back in a lot of places. We have already lost a lot of things. This is a bankruptcy stage, but we have two choices. We can continue calling it a crisis, thinking that we can address every problem, all the problems through mitigation efforts, or we can admit that we are bankrupt. And if we are bankrupt, then our approach is different. So our checking account was our surface water. We started using it. Then we went after our saving account, groundwater, the water that we had inherited from our ancestors. Then we also used our credit cards. We promised water to people. Development continues. Farmers expanded their lands and got loans and so on. Developers developed and so on. And now we have all these essentially creditors that are asking for water, and we don't have enough reserves. So we either can fool them. We say, this is a crisis. Give me another chance. Give me one more project, and I'm going to resolve this, and make everyone more dependent and increase the loss. Or say, look, no, we have to file for bankruptcy, and then deal with what we have. I think the moment, if we understand that it's already very late, but the problem that we are dealing with is a bankruptcy situation, then we understand that we have to combine mitigation with adaptation. Some of the things that we have created would be our new normal, and we have to deal with it. It is late, and it's too late, but it's taking an action today is better than tomorrow.
Okay, we've got time for two more questions, and and both are from students again. As Afghanistan threatens Iran's water supply in the eastern region of that nation by the damming of the Kherson River, has Iran sought to assert its claim to this water at the United Nations?
Unfortunately, I mean, as a United Nations staff member, I gotta, I think, be very positive. But it's not easy for the United Nations to intervene in these problems. We don't have strong laws in place to essentially reverse this situation. Afghanistan is not the only nation that is trying to limit its outflows, essentially, transboundary outflows. We have seen it, and we are seeing it in other places this planet. We are seeing countries essentially using whatever method they can by damming, by increasing consumption, trying to reduce the water outflows. And the rules and regulations we have in place would not prevent essentially those actions. So still we continue to invite people to solve their problems, nations, through essentially different negotiations and measures. But one thing here to consider is that transboundary problems like this always have an upstream and a downstream, right? So if you only think about the water volume, you are always dealing with a zero-sum game. One nation gains and another nation loses. But if you think along the lines that we discussed today, and understand that water is more than, water problems involve a lot of other things, and there are other things that are connected to this. You realize that transboundary water problems cannot be resolved by focusing only on water, right? So water is part of a bigger equation, which involves lots of other things. So water problems cannot be solved in vacuum. The US and Canada didn't reach an agreement over better management of the Great Lakes just because they were concerned about water and they had no other relationship, or everything else was hostile. What we know in transboundary system is that water must be part of a bigger package, and the nations that are interconnected over many different issues in parallel then can solve their water problems. Otherwise, it's one country that is using water as a weapon to threaten the neighbor all the time.
Okay, we've got this last question, and I think I'm really excited about asking it. This is from a student. Dr. Madani, was this how you envisioned your life when you were a young student?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I was passionate about water as the only child of parents working for the water sector. I knew I liked water, but I could never imagine that I would get arrested over water. I could never imagine that I would be called a water terrorist, a bioterrorist, and the accusations were just amazing. It's sad. Like, I can't go back to my country. because I advocated for water. Why did they call me water terrorist? Because the moment I started talking about water scarcity, they thought I want to shut down the agricultural sector, make people unemployed, and create ISIS. Why did they call me a bioterrorist? Because they thought I was trying to make the country dependent on other nations when it comes to food issues, and then use GMOs to destroy the Iranians genetically. These sound crazy, right? And they thought I was 007. But these are legitimate concerns of nations. And if you don't know these things, then you cannot implement solutions. I think I didn't envision it to be this way. It's sad for me that I work for the United Nations, but when it comes to, and trying to help many countries, but I cannot help my home country as much as I wanted to. But I think I'm happy that I have a chance to help and to see problems differently. I also think this is the lucky part, that I'm one of the advocates of the Global South in the Global North. And I'm using the institutions that we have in the Global North to remind people about those problems and the realities of the ground. It's not what I envisioned, but I think I'm very lucky that I'm alive. I'm not arrested. My friends, there are some of my friends who are still in jail after 6 years because they cared about Asiatic cheetahs, biodiversity, and so on. And these are the problems you never hear. And that's why we got to understand what is happening in those places if we want to help them solve their problems.
Well, that's a wrap. Please join me in thanking Dr. Madani. Sir, wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
As all of you return home tonight and drive past our beautiful Grand Traverse Bay, consider our own good fortune and the fact that most of the world has never seen that much fresh water in their lives. Our next regular event will be on the 15th of February with Lucy Hornby. Ms. Hornby is a visiting scholar at Harvard Center for Chinese Studies. Her research focuses on the revival of the Chinese state and the rise of Xi Jinping. We're also working to present what we call a pop-up presentation on the conflict in the Middle East, and we've tentatively scheduled it for the 14th of December. Finally, I'd like to give a special thanks to Vern Powell, IAF Board Advisory Member, and his brother George, and to his colleague Sohrab Masudi for inviting and bringing Dr. Madani to NMC and our IAF community. Okay. One final thank you. I want to acknowledge the generosity of the Grand Traverse tribe of Chippewa and Ottawa Indians. They made this program possible tonight through their grant and their commitment to protecting the resources, so particularly the fresh water that renews this great land, Miigwech. And we hope you enjoyed the presentation. If you're already a member, thank you for your support. If not, it's easy to join. And if you're watching from outside the region, or if you're headed to warmer climates, become an online member this year. It's a great way to support IAF from afar. Till the next time, be well, be safe, and go forth and do great things. Thank you.